Your boys are back with the Money Stop Mafia. This is your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day, the week, the year, you name it. The Money Stop, aptly named because he's Cole Cusumano. I'm Steven Cusumano. We are the Cusumano brothers. And how could you do your NASCAR betting without knowing that the guy over there, Cole, chose Kyle Larson to win at Homestead, which was pretty obvious. Let's be real here. I mean, Kyle Larson to win any week he's favored every week for a reason, but to win at Homestead of all places just made sense. And it was just, again, classic Kyle Larson, who came really close to sweeping the week like we talked about going into it.
Yeah, man, that was the sucky part. I mean, like you say, it's kind of obvious to pick Kyle Larson for Homestead the way he rips the fence. Won the truck race in incredible fashion. Drove from the back of the pack with, 40 to go, and won the race. And made the pass, I think, 2 to go for the lead. Xfinity race, he lapped all the way up to freaking like 8th, I think it was, and then he got screwed in a late restart by Sam Mayer, and he finished 4th in that one, and went on to win Sunday. So 2 for 3 is not bad if you're Kyle Larson, but it stings a little bit if you put some money on that 3-race winner parlay for Kyle Larson at Homestead. So that part sucked, but you get a chance to do that all over again at Bristol here in a few weeks when he does triple duty once again. So something to keep our eye on. But yeah, overall, we had a really, really great weekend of analysis for Homestead, kind of under the radar as well. Looking through the top 10 and just the results in general here, we got the top 2 finishers, my winner pick in Kyle Larson and my sleeper pick in Alex Bowman, pole sitter Alex Bowman, who had an incredible weekend. We also got, let's see here, 6 of the top 10 finishers. We got 8 of the top 15 finishers. So really, really good weekend of analysis. And I think another really important thing to note here is that it wasn't all favorites in the top 10 that we had. We had 2 favorites, 2 sleepers, and 2 value picks that made up the top 10. So if you were to put some money on some prop finishes for top 5s, top 10s for those drivers, likely made out pretty damn well, including the likes of some guys like AJ Allmendinger and Ryan Preece, who finished inside there. So yeah, really great weekend. Got some positive momentum once again going out of Homestead now into the paperclip of Martinsville. So really pumped up about that one. Short track racing, baby.
I mean, Martinsville, one of my favorite tracks, if not my favorite track of all time. It's one of the most fun. And man, we've got a great show on tap. As we look ahead to Martinsville, we are going to get to our value picks. We're going to get to some of our favorite trends, our daily fantasy lineup recommendation. We'll give you some of our favorite prop bets as well. So we've got a really good day of content planned here in terms of what you're going to hear as we go to the paperclip. And Cole, let's take it to the bank. This is where we kind of make some money for everybody and preview the week ahead, starting with the odds pre-qualifying. The favorite to win the race per BetMGM and most other sports books is Ryan Blaney at plus 350. And interesting week for Blaney, who was one of the drivers that we did not mention last week, but had a really good shot at the win, but engine expired once again. So nonetheless, even though it's happened twice in the last 3 weeks, he's favored by Vegas to win this race. Kyle Larson is plus 550, and then you've got a 3-way tie for third in odds. It's William Byron, Denny Hamlin, and Chase Elliott, all at plus 700. So we've talked a lot about the same favorites these first few weeks of the season, Cole, and that's, looking at the Vegas, the odds makers, it's very much so a who's who in a couple of respects, but some names missing, like Christopher Bell, and we'll get to some of that loose change when we discuss later in the show. But after a disappointing showing, those are the 5 drivers Vegas likes. And as we talk about our favorites, we're each going to give 2 drivers that we think are primed for victory this week and are a very high floor, high ceiling option. Why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, you know what? First off, great, intuition by us to not include Blaney on the outline last week, because while he did finished runner-up in the race last year, and he has a great resume there, he finished dead last. So kudos to us, but that will not be the case for Martinsville, because like a track like Phoenix earlier this year, it is one place where he is almost automatic at, and I think in an even more successful fashion, because Ryan Blaney has won 2 of the last 3 races at the paperclip. So we'll start right there. Ryan Blaney, once again, the odds-on favorite, plus 350. Heavy favorite for the win at that. Also, a very steep value for daily fantasy at $11,200. Most expensive driver in daily fantasy. Going to be very tough to get him into your lineups this weekend. But Ryan Blaney, only one of 2 drivers with top 10s in all 6 next-gen starts at Martinsville. His 3.5 average is, as you can imagine, best in series in the next gen. Lowest finish of 7th in that time. So that's really just incredible numbers there, even hard to fathom in some aspects. But the one thing I want to note here is he only has 182 laps led. So if you were to consider him for daily fantasy, maybe that's a guy that you don't put in your lineups, but rather put some money on for the race win or for some finisher props instead. Because again, laps led are a decent amount of the points totaling for daily fantasy, and he has not done a whole lot of that even with his success at that track. But that extends beyond the next-gen era for Ryan Blaney. 8.3 average in 18 starts is the best in the series. So he has been really damn good at this track ever since he made the jump to Cup. And I know it's hard to predict those things. He has 3 straight DNFs. Engines have expired in 2 of his last 3 starts. But you really just can't think about that when you're making bets. So I'm not too worried about it. The only thing that does worry me is that we said the same exact thing pretty much with Phoenix and his resume, and then he blew an engine there. So you take what you get with Ryan Blaney, but I think the bad luck bug is going to be out of the equation this weekend in Virginia. And then I got to go with last week's winner, my winner pick, Kyle Larson, the obvious answer. Plus 550 for the race win once again, second shortest odds at that, and $11,000 in daily fantasy as well. Kyle Larson has a 5-race streak of finishing 6th or better at Martinsville. That includes 4 podium finishes with a win in 2023, a second-place finish, and a third-place finish in 2024, and a combined 157 laps led in 2024, with a 5.5 average, good enough for third best in the series in the next-gen era. So Kyle Larson, there's not a whole lot that needs to be said about him. We know what kind of caliber driver he is. Coming off a win, I expect him to be a strong contender once again here in Martinsville come Sunday. And I think another thing important to note here is that we talked about this on Horsepower Hump Day here at the SpeedFreaks Lucas Oil Studios. It seems like in the spring, the Hendrick cars always have it hooked up. It's your Hendrick Chevys, it's the Penske Fords, and then a little bit of the Toyotas, but you're looking at those 2 stables, the Hendrick Chevys, Penske Fords, as maybe your top contenders for the Cookout 400 this weekend.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, and I didn't even hear you guys discuss that, but it's the proving the concept once again that the Hendrick Chevys are always fast in the spring. And the epitome of that has been William Byron, who is part of our favorites category for, I think, the 6th straight week. And there's a good reason for that. And it's also William, you pointing to William Boring back there?
He's not in the frame.
He's not in the frame, but
I
knew
he's back there. He's back there.
Yeah. Well, this is the real life William Byron. And the real life William Byron is really good at Martinsville. And in the 2025 season, there he is. Hello, William Boring, Raptor, and everything. Well, William Byron on the track, we mentioned plus 700, 10,400 in daily fantasy, 2-time winner at Martinsville. That includes the first next-gen race there and this race a year ago. So he's the defending race winner in the spring at Martinsville. He led over 130 laps led here last year, and he has an 8.5 average finish in the next-gen, which is 4th among active drivers right now during this era. I mentioned 10,400 in daily fantasy, so he's cheaper than the 2 drivers you mentioned, in Blaney and Larson. So in the case of William Byron, he's very much still on the radar. Despite finishing just outside of the top 10, he showed great speed, and he's probably been the most consistently fast car every single track we've been to, every single week of the season. Mm-hmm. On that note, how about Denny Hamlin showing some speed, flexing the muscles? You mentioned Penske and Hendrick. Well, how could you mention Martinsville without mentioning kind of the modern day Mr. Martinsville in Denny Hamlin, who obviously doesn't dominate at this track the way he used to, but finished top 5 at Homestead, was a contender for the race win, 10,700 in daily fantasy. Makes me a little bit scared just when you look at the other drivers at that price range. I'd probably prefer one of the Hendrick Chevys, but you're looking at a guy that in the next gen at Martinsville has 4 top 5 finishes, and between 4 starts, he has led 461 laps led at the paperclip, which is the second most among active drivers. And overall, I mentioned the modern day Mr. Martinsville. You're looking at 5 wins, over 2,400 laps led, and a 10th place average finish among 38 starts. So that's among the most starts of any driver, among the highest floor of any driver, most laps led, you name it. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves with Denny Hamlin. He's a guy that you think of when you think about the grandfather clocks, and he's coming off a great result after, a little bit of an inconsistent beginning of the season. And I think that it means all good things for Denny Hamlin. They've got that thing souped up, and he's going to arguably one of his career best tracks on the circuit. So give me William Byron, give me Denny Hamlin, and I also would agree with your picks of Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson. I think that again, with Ryan Blaney, it's not a case of, a lack of skill. It's just been terrible luck. And I don't know if it's something with the way they're preparing the cars. I mean, you could probably answer better to that than I can, but you can't bet like that. You can't bet expecting the unexpected. You can only bank off of controlling what you can control. And what we've seen is that Ryan Blaney is the modern day ringer at Martinsville right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, again, something you can't really forecast. I think the bad luck's going to be out of their system. 3 straight weeks is just really abysmal for any race team, but especially for someone like Ryan Blaney, who's been really fast, really competitive each week so far. So I fully expect all 4 of those cars to be really strong this weekend. And as we transition into sleepers here, sleepers are drivers with a more outside chance of winning the race. And there's some interesting ones in this section here because I felt great about Blaney, felt great about Larson, felt great about Byron. And then Denny Hamlin, I chose over the driver I'm about to mention in Chase Elliott because I feel like, and you might disagree with me on this here, but I think Denny Hamlin, despite Chase Elliott's consistency, I think he seems a little bit more closer to getting to victory lane with the upcoming slate of schedule compared to Chase Elliott. And I think on that, we'll get to Chase Elliott right now. Chase Elliott plus 700 for the race win. A really, really nice value at $9,900 for daily fantasy. He won at Martinsville back in 2020, his championship winning season. That's what propelled him to that championship at Phoenix. This is important to note here too. We're going to talk a lot about laps led here for Chase Elliott specifically, but in general for Martinsville. And when you're considering daily fantasy, I mentioned it earlier, laps led are a big portion of how those points total out. There's a lot of laps that can be led here with I guess 400 now for this weekend in the Cookout 400. So with that in mind, Chase Elliott, very young driver in the Cup Series still. He has led 1,233 laps in just 19 starts. That's third best overall in the series, and that is half as many as the 2 drivers ranked in front of him with 38 starts or more. So that's
double
a very
the amount of starts.
very, very telling stat right there for if you're considering Chase Elliott for daily fantasy, which I would, because as we'll get into it later on, this is a very difficult week for that. So moving on though, last year Chase Elliott finished 2nd in the spring race and 3rd in the fall, and this was the race in 2024 where I really looked at Chase Elliott and that 9 team and I said, okay, this team is back following that injury the year prior. So a track that he's just been really good at in his career. And again, looking at those numbers from 2024, almost 200 laps led between both starts. Over his last 3 starts, almost 300 laps led. And in the next gen era, 515 laps led. That's good enough for best in the next gen era in the series. So on top of that, he's got 3 more 10th place finishes. So 5 total in 6 next gen starts and an 8.7 average finish, good enough for 5th best overall in the next-gen era. So Chase Elliott, really, really rock-solid driver at Martinsville throughout his entire career, but I'm looking at those laps led as a really strong determining factor in how I'm utilizing him this weekend for a betting sense. Maybe I would definitely consider him for a race win, obviously, but daily fantasy is where I'm really looking at to really utilize Chase Elliott for this weekend. And then I mentioned the Penske Fords and their prowess at the paperclip. Joey Logano, a guy that has not scored a top 10 this year through 6 starts, which is mind-blowing when you consider his speed and how much he's led. But I think this could very well be the week where he finally gets one because he has 11 straight top 10 finishes at Martinsville, which is just insane to even comprehend. I feel like that's a very underrated thing that's not being talked about a lot. But in that span, he also has 2 runner-up finishes. He has 1 win here, and he also has 1,200 laps led in his career with a 10.3 average finish, good enough for 3rd best overall in 32 starts. So Joey Logano, an underrated pick to an extent, just given how he's finished in 2025. But I think you look at his numbers at Martinsville, they speak for themselves. So that plus 800 for the race win is what I'm considering, as well as his value for daily fantasy at $9,600. So 2 great values for daily fantasy there in Chase Elliott and Joey Logano, and 2 great outside shots at the win at those 2 drivers as well.
Yeah, that feels like a tier of drivers that you just mentioned, those 2 sleepers, where it kind of feels like a prove-it race for them because you talked about the consistency both of them have had there in their entire careers, and you talked about the lack of results for Joey Logano. You kind of have to see it this week, barring some, if he finishes outside the top 10 and something happens, sure. But in the case of Chase Elliott, listen, he's had the high floor, and I like what you said about the fact you think Denny Hamlin has a better chance at the win because actually I would agree with that. That's the one thing that concerns me with Chase Elliott is that they've had this top 10, borderline top 5, maybe speed on certain days, but he hasn't been that race contender every single week that, you think about all the laps he's led at Martinsville. I feel like a large part of that has been not necessarily recent over these past couple of years. And you kind of dove into that a little bit with the stats, but I just need to see a little bit more speed, like race winning speed, lap leading speed out of Chase Elliott. And if I don't see it this week, I'm going to really start thinking twice before I see him and his name on our outlines here, because sure, top 10s are great, but they're not top 5s, and they're certainly not wins, and they're certainly not giving you daily fantasy points for laps led. So I'm getting bored of the Chase Elliott top 10s and the strong days. And, he had a pit road speeding penalty and he rebounded for a top 10. Like, oh, it's a great team performance, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't, on certain occasions, have that race winning caliber speed. And we've seen it, glimpses of the top 5 speed, but I really need to see more, especially this week at Martinsville, which, his whole career, going back to his rookie year, has been one of his bread and butter tracks in the Cup Series. And I really want to see it this week, especially considering Kyle Larson's got to win. William Byron's got some wins. It's something that Alex Bowman even contended for the race win last week. I can't think of a race this year where Chase Elliott, yes, he's running the top 5, but has there been a point in time where you think Chase Elliott is a shoe-in for the win in any race this year, and even the large part of last year?
No, not really. Nope.
Probably
I
not.
mean, he had race-winning speed at Coda, but he had a charge from the back of the field on lap 1 to finish 4th. So that's another coulda, woulda, shoulda been race for him. So I completely agree. It's a do-or-die weekend for this team.
Yeah, so I'm in wait-and-see mode there. I will say your 2 sleepers there are 2 guys that are high-ceiling picks. Like, they can go out there, they can win the race. I'm going to give you a couple of high-floor picks with maybe less of a chance to win the race as my 2 sleepers. And I will start with Chase Briscoe, who has started to get things on the right track here after a 4th-place finish at Homestead. He was one of the fast Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas that we mentioned, and kind of underrated. I honestly didn't know this until we dove into the outline that you created this week, but he has top 10s in 5 out of 10, or excuse me, top 10s in 5 out of 6 starts at Martinsville in this next-gen era since he's debuted in the Cup Series. And not just that, but his lowest finish, which came in the fall of last year, was 15th. So you're talking about a guy that has had a knack for keeping the nose clean at Martinsville, which, as we know, isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do, even with this generation of car. He has a best finish of 4th here, and he is tied for the 5th best average finish of 8.7. So Chase Briscoe, a guy that traditionally he's great on the short tracks, but he's not someone I thought of necessarily in the past when we came to Martinsville. But listen, Joe Gibbs Racing has always had a knack for this track, and I think that him coming here in general is a good thing, that he's a shoe-in for a top 10, but him coming here in Joe Gibbs Racing equipment really entices me. So I'm definitely looking at Chase Briscoe at plus 1,000 for the race win as a very possible thing that could happen. I'm not crazy about the DFS value at 9,300, but as we say every week, we'll see where he starts. If he's, starting in the top 5, maybe there's a chance to rack up those all-important laps led points, like you said. And you're starting deep in the pack, there's the chance for those all-important place differential points. But this, as you said, is a track that you're going to really be focused on the laps led and the fastest laps and that sort of thing. So that being said, another guy that had a strong finish last week, a strong showing from the Toyota camp. How about Bubba Wallace? Plus 3,500 for the race win. 7,200 in daily fantasy definitely piques my interest. And here's why. After that 3rd place at Homestead, his best finish of the year, which was his 2nd top 10 of the season. Listen, he's led 76 laps over the last 2 weeks. So they're starting to get things really roped up into gear. And I think that's kind of team-wide, manufacturer-wide. And Bubba Wallace has been no exception. He has had top 10s in half of his next-gen starts at Martinsville, including the last time there when he had his best career finish at this track of 4th in the playoffs. He also has posted an 11th place average finish, which, as we say a lot of weeks, if the average finish at a certain track is above your average finish for your career, it's probably a good thing. And looking at the recent success, the momentum, the history at Martinsville, I feel really strongly that Bubba Wallace could come away with a strong week. And I legitimately think he could be a contender for the race win, an outside chance, provided that they unload with great speed. I feel like this is one of those tracks that he's definitely more than capable of taking the checkered flag at. So, yes, there's more of an outside chance between he and Chase Briscoe than Joey Logano and Chase Elliott, but I feel like that kind of makes this sleepers category this week pretty well-rounded.
Yeah, I think both have a great shot at the win, honestly. I mean, In the case of Chase Briscoe, like the speed has been there, but they, like Brian Blaney, have not had the best luck. And I'm happy you mentioned seeing where he starts before you put him in your DFS lineup, because he's a guy that's qualified top 5 in his last 5 starts at Martinsville.
Yep.
So,
And this year, started on the pole. He's posted some good qualifying results.
Yep, exactly. And you just need one good positive result to get things kickstarted in the right direction. So I really was pleased what I saw from Chase Briscoe last week. Top 4 finish. Even Bubba Wallace. This whole season's really impressed me. I know only has 2 top 10s, but he's leading laps. He's running up front, and he's just in a really good headspace. And you haven't seen that a lot in Bubba's career. We've mentioned it time and time again. He's a very temperamental driver. So that's always going to bode well for him on Sundays. And let's not forget, he's also a winner in the Truck Series at Martinsville before he got disqualified. So it's a track he knows how to get around. It's a track he's had recent success at. So I do think that those 2 Toyotas could definitely play a factor in the top 10 come Sunday.
Well, a well-rounded sleepers category there. Let's move on to value picks. And I think this is one of the best tiers we have this week because of the drivers that are up for the taking. I'll go first this time because I mentioned Josh Berry last week as one of my favorite value picks. And he finished 17th, which all things considered was not the race-winning performance that we saw at Vegas, but a very solid performance nonetheless. And, well, he's one of those guys that we've always touted as you think of him when you go to the short tracks. That's always been his bread and butter just because of his background. And, remember he had the spin on pit road, which obviously made that 17th place finish misleading because the speed was definitely better than 17th. He was a borderline top 10 car the entire time. And thinking about Josh Berry's path in NASCAR, feels like Martinsville is one of the first tracks where you really started to recognize the talent that was there. He had the Xfinity Series win there. He's also had 2 Cup Series starts there, including the most recent race there in the fall. He finished 16th. So that was also, of course, in different equipment. Now you look at a car and a team that's had great speed and a great sort of trajectory on their season so far, and the confidence is still riding high. I think that Josh Berry is someone that I could very, very easily look at as a contender for a top 10. And listen, he's won a race this year. It's not the craziest thing to say, but valued at plus 3,000 for the race win. Obviously shorter odds than when he won at Vegas, but that's because he's a winner in the Cup Series now, and there's something to be said for that. And he's 8,100 in daily fantasy, which is also a really good value, pending where he qualifies as well. I also want to mention Chris Buescher, and we've talked a little bit about Chris Buescher, kind of like the seesaw battle of how high we were on him begin the season, and then I was kind of low on him because I wasn't crazy about the results early in the year. And you were high on him at certain tracks. Chris Buescher, a guy that I'm certainly looking at this week at 7,400 in DFS. That's a borderline lineup lock for me. He's also plus 4,000 for the race win. And we've seen the speed out of RFK. I mean, we talked about Ryan Preece before and how he's got some incredible speed so far this year. And I know you're going to probably talk about him in a second, but taking it away on Chris Buescher first, best finish of 8th, only top 10 in the next gen at Martinsville. So he hasn't necessarily had the, I guess, top 10 pedigree at Martinsville that you'd expect to see from somebody, but he does have 4 top 15 finishes. He's been on, again, an upward slope, but upward exponential trajectory since these last couple of years. So I don't read too much into those results. And he's also coming off his 4th top 10 of 2025, where he has the 4th best average finish this year of 11.8. So it was a little bit, for me, I had very, very high expectations for Chris Buescher this year. I said he was a dark horse for the championship 4, and I was a little bit let down at first because I didn't see the race winning speed at the first couple of weeks that I thought we would. But he's been lurking. Lurking's the perfect word to describe what Chris Buescher's been doing this year, and I feel like he's one of those guys that, in comparison to a team like Hendrick or Penske or Joe Gibbs, kind of feels like he gets hotter as the season progresses. And looking at a track that certainly plays into his wheelhouse, I think we're going to start to see that shift begin to happen for Chris Buescher. You're not going to make money by betting the obvious things. And the guy that has only 1 top 10 among his next-gen starts at Martinsville is certainly not the obvious thing. But you got to go outside your comfort zone a little bit, read a little deeper into the storyline, think about who the driver is, where they're at in the season. And I feel like things are poised to start breaking through for Chris Buescher, and I think it can definitely start this week.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll be honest, like, I was making this outline and looking at the potential value picks, and I was stunned when I saw his value $7,400 is a steal for someone who has the fourth best average in the series at this point through 6 starts. For someone who has 4 top 10s this season. Again, like his numbers weren't that enthralling for Martinsville, but just looking at how he's done this season, it seemed like a no-brainer to include him on the lineup for that value. And with that in mind, there were 2 drivers that I was like, all right, they're going on the outline. I don't even care like what their stats are going in. They're going on. First one was Josh Berry, obviously. Second one, as you alluded to, Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece, 3,500 plus 3,500 for the race win and $7,500 for daily fantasy. Both those drivers, Josh Berry and Ryan Preece, are locks for this weekend for daily fantasy purposes. And like Josh Berry, he is known for his short track upbringing, and he's riding back-to-back top 10s going into Martinsville, which I think is a testament to how he and this team, led by Derek Finley, have been able to kind of mount these rallies to get these quality finishes and have these quality days, because you mentioned it with, I think, your analysis last week. Like, the speed has not been an anomaly. He's had top 10 contending speed all season, and they're really showing what they have as far as talent goes with this RFK stable from this number 60 bunch. So I'm really impressed with what I've seen from this team. This is a track that fits right into his wheelhouse. You think back to his first next-gen start here in 2023. Won the pole, led 135 laps, and then he also had a best finish of 9th in the next-gen era this past spring, with the lowest finish of 20th. So he has a really, well, I'm taking all the stats from the past out the window, out of the equation, but if you want to hear them, he has a lowest finish of 20th in the next-gen era, best finish of 9th. So even with that crappier equipment at SHR, he had a great floor, and I think he has an even higher ceiling and a higher floor for this weekend for RFK. So I love Ryan Preece this weekend. And then this next one's more of a gut call and playing into the SpeedFreaks mojo. For those who don't know, here at SpeedFreaks, whenever we do interviews with drivers, they tend to go on the next week and perform really well on race days. Well, that driver that we talked to today on Horsepower Hump Day was Zane Smith. And what do you know? Zane Smith, he's coming off an 11th place finish at Homestead, which was preceded by a top 10 at Vegas. So he's a driver that's actually been pretty solid this season, despite where he is in the standings. And even if you look at like last year, how he finished the year off, he was one of the best drivers that was not a playoff contender with the best average finish in those 10 races in the playoff slate. So he's a very talented driver. And also, we mentioned a few times on the show to start the season off, it's a good idea to put like a weekly dart throw on a front row driver to finish inside the top 10 or as a value pick, because on any given week, Gregson, Gilliland, or Zane can get a top 10 finish, and we're going to go with him this weekend, playing on the SpeedFreaks mojo and his momentum so far going into this weekend. So he does have a career best 21st place finish at Martinsville in the Cup Series, which came last year in just 3 starts. So there's not a whole lot to go based off of, but just going based off a gut call and SpeedFreaks mojo, we're going to go with Zane Smith as a value pick at a really, really enticing $5,300 for daily fantasy. And 35 plus 35,000 for a race winner, which we're not going to entertain. I guess stranger things have happened, but yeah, daily fantasy, $5,300 is really nice.
Yeah, it feels like Russian roulette between those drivers you mentioned. They're all so talented. That the speed has been there, and that equipment, and just great crew chiefs, like great all the way around. They're a team that's trending upward in a lot of different ways, and we've seen it, like you said. Who's going to get the top 10 this week? And it very well could be Zane Smith. And proof to your theory. I know you guys talked to Jimmy Johnson back around the Daytona 500. He finished 3rd.
Exactly.
I think you talked to Seabell, and he won 3 races in a row, right? So,
yep, exactly.
Proof of the theory. And, there's reason to be believing in that. So that ties up our 12 drivers here. I'm going to go through all of them. Our favorites were Ryan Blaney, Kyle Larson, William Byron, Denny Hamlin. Our sleepers were Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, Chase Briscoe, and Bubba Wallace. And our value picks or Ryan Preece, which I love, by the way, Zane Smith, Josh Berry, and Chris Buescher. So as we discuss our 6 drivers, Cole, we each pick one per tier. I'm going to go with the Killer Bees, Byron, Bubba, and Buescher as my favorite sleeper and value pick of the week.
Damn, I gave you Josh Berry. I mentioned all these stats about the Penske Fords and their success, the paperclip. You went with Chris Buescher. I mean, he's great, but Josh Berry in short track racing, come on.
I'm a Buescher believer.
All right. I like it. Changing of the tides. I'm going to go with my favorite, Ryan Blaney. Sleeper, Chase Elliott, and then my value pick, Ryan Preece.
All right, I'm down. Sounds good to me. I have no debate really. Again, wait and see mode on Chase Elliott, but that's pretty much it. We've teased the daily fantasy options here, Cole, and before we get to that, I do want to talk about some prop bets with you, big money bets as we like to call them, which it's hard to bet on anything as a big money bet at Martinsville, especially with how the odds are shaking out this week. But taking a look at some of those that at least right now are available on DraftKings so far, what catches your attention?
The top 3 that I had were top 10 props for Ryan Preece, Bubba Wallace, and Josh Berry, all valued at plus 110, so just above even payout. If I would narrow it down, I'd probably say Preece and Berry. But I mean, all 3 are really good ones to consider, given how they performed this year and their prowess at Martinsville. The only other one that just differentiate from a top 10 prop, I like the top 5 prop of Chase Briscoe at plus 140. And these are on DraftKings, by the way. BetMGM does not have those up just yet. They usually have the better payouts for these kind of prop bets. So keep an eye on BetMGM's lines once they go live. But for right now, I like Preece, Bubba, Berry top 10, and Briscoe top 5.
Now, I want to cover some loose change because there are a few high-profile drivers that we really haven't mentioned at all, save for a few, passing by quotes about them. I think we have not talked about Christopher Bell, back-to-back disappointing performances after the 3 straight wins, and we've not talked about Tyler Reddick, who I would think we would agree had a very disappointing performance last week at Homestead. Those are 2 guys that we were mentioning all throughout, really, the first 5 weeks as first, second, third in your kind of power rankings of the season and your championship contenders, yet we haven't mentioned them at all today. Covering that loose change, why is that?
Well, first of all, Tyler Reddick's stats at Martinsville are abysmal, so I was not going to include him on this outline despite his speed predominantly all season. And in the case of Christopher Bell, his numbers were not at all in line with any of our favorites or sleepers. I obviously don't want to include him as a sleeper, being as he has 3 wins. But
sure.
In regards to favorites, I just like those 4 drivers of Blaney, Larson, Byron, and Hamlin much better in their odds at getting the win. Christopher Bell, we've seen this trend time and time again since he's been in the Cup Series. Like he'll go on these hot stretches and then he'll just be ice cold for you don't know how long. So until he breaks out of this slump, you really can't have a whole lot of confidence in betting him. Obviously, you're going to have the confidence given the equipment, given the talent, but he's got to snap out of that at some point. And yeah, back-to-back stinkers. Wasn't really feeling it for Martinsville.
Yeah, I have nothing against that. It was, we kind of went through those dozen drivers and it didn't feel weird that we didn't mention them. It was just like compared to the rest of the season, I guess, when you look at it holistically. But
and like we wouldn't be surprised if he got a top 10 or won the race, obviously. But like even you go back through like in recent memory at Martinsville, he hasn't been like a top car in my opinion. It's the Hendrick Chevys, it's the Penske Fords.
Yeah, it's he falls into that tier of drivers that's like between favorites and sleepers. Like we're not saying he's not going to finish in the top 10 or contend for a win, but we like him not as much as the 4 favorites we mentioned, and we like him. It would be downright. It would make no sense to include him as a sleeper. So he's just sort of floating in between both categories in purgatory, I guess. In money stop purgatory, we can coin that now. Other kinds of bets, though, over-unders, which are on Grid Rival, which is a great dynamic sports betting app, which they label as better or worse finishes. There's also head-to-heads. When it comes to those kinds of bets, Cole, what caught your attention this week?
Yeah, there's a few, actually. First of all, there's a promo on Grid Rival. Denny Hamlin, 39th or better. That's free money right there. So put those into your parlays. Some other ones I like, though. I like the Kyle Larson better than 5th, given his resume at the paperclip in the next gen and coming off that win at Homestead. But some ones that really caught my eye with really good positional values. Briscoe better than 8.5, so 8th or better. Berry 14th or better. Preece 12th or better. Those are kind of self-explanatory and the confidence that we have in those drivers at this track. But the other one I wanted to mention as kind of one to differentiate a little bit, because we always give better than props. Brad Keselowski, worse than 12.5, so outside the top 12. They've not been good this year at all. The speed has not been there. They just have not looked very inspiring in any capacity. I know he's a winner here in the past at Martinsville, but that has not translated into the next gen. He does not have good stats here at all since the 7th generation car has been introduced, and just given his mean streak in 2025, no confidence at all in that team. Again, like Christopher Bell, I wouldn't be surprised if you get a top 10 or better than 12th in this case, but there's no way I am picking a better than 12th place for Brad Keselowski at this point in the season.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's been one of the biggest disappointments of the season, probably. Just feels like there's no positives whatsoever regarding that team, unfortunately. As far as head-to-head driver matchups, Cole, a couple that I will highlight here are Chase Elliott to finish over Christopher Bell by 2 positions. This is also on Grid Rival. So C-Bell has a 1.5 positional buffer to finish. So if he finishes 1 spot behind Chase Elliott, you lose that bet. But I'm saying that Chase Elliott will finish 2 spots in front of C-Bell. And you've also got Bubba Wallace to finish within 1 spot of Alex Bowman, who's another name we haven't mentioned, in spite of the fact that he's coming off a great near race winning run. Obviously, Martinsville has not been a track that's been kind to him in the past, but we've already discussed that it has been for Bubba. So Bubba to finish within 1 spot of Bowman. A couple I really like there, which you could parlay with one another. And I know that you've got a couple that you have your sights set on too.
So those were the 2 that I had circled. The 2 that I have highlighted were our wins from last week. So we correctly got Byron over Blaney and Bowman over Briscoe. But yeah, so even like with those 2 that I had written down, Elliott over Bell, Bubba over Byron, like those still can kind of go either way when you consider the talent of Bell and Elliott and their resumes at Martinsville. Obviously, like we know what Bowman's been able to do this season, 2nd best average in the series, runner-up last week. He's a winner at Martinsville as well in the Cup Series. So it's like I'm not like advocating to go all in on these head-to-head parlays. I think there's more value in the better or worse finishes. There's more value in the prop bets. There's more value in the race winner props. So I would stray away, but if I was to give 2, it'd be the Elliott over Bell and Bubba over Byron, or Bubba over Bowman, sorry.
For sure. And now we've teased this DFS lineup for a lot of the episode, and you teased the fact that there's not a ton of flexibility to work with in daily fantasy right now, with just how the drivers are sort of budgeted out. So there's a couple variations of this lineup you can do, the one that you're about to rattle off here, but there really wasn't as many options that we're confident in as there are in typical race weekends.
No, this is an extremely difficult week to do daily fantasy, and I almost wouldn't even like advise to do it just because, like I said, there's better value in the prop bets, race winner values, and the better or worse props as well. But the one that I came up with here was our ace being William Byron, followed by Chase Briscoe, Josh Berry, Ryan Preece, Chris Buescher, and Bubba Wallace rounding it out. Now, the way I went about constructing this lineup was I went immediately all the way down to Ryan Preece and Josh Berry and put them in there. And from there, you're thinking, oh, there's probably a decent amount you could work with. Well, there really isn't. Like the next best option from there is Chris Buescher, who I wasn't overly high on, but given his resume so far in 2025, I put him in there. And then you have enough to put Bubba Wallace in there as well. He has a really good value, obviously our cheapest driver in this lineup in that regard. But then you're only really able to get Briscoe in there, and you have an option between, in my opinion, your top 2 options are going to be William Byron or Chase Elliott with those 5 drivers previously picked. I went William Byron because obviously he's more expensive and he has a better shot at getting the win, seeing as he won twice here in the next gen already, and he won this race last year. But you could also make the case for Chase Elliott with the laps leading stat I provided earlier. So that was one way you could do it. And then I tried a different method, and I went with picking one of the true aces, a Blaney or a Larson. There's almost no way you can include Ryan Blaney in this lineup unless you're picking like freaking, I don't know, Austin Dillon and John Hunter Nemechek as back markers for your lineup, which I wouldn't advocate for. So the most expensive driver that I went for was Kyle Larson. And if you were to do Kyle Larson as your ace, you could still have Bubba, Buescher, Preece, and Berry as your 4 bottom drivers. And then you could also include Bowman as your second driver as opposed to Chase Briscoe, which you could make the case Larson, Bowman, Berry, Preece, Buescher, Bubba's a more better rounded lineup given their stats from this year. But I wasn't like overly happy with Bowman's stats at Martinsville in the next gen, so that's why I went with the other one with Byron leading it off.
Yeah, and I feel honestly pretty solid about that. I know there's not a lot of flexibility, but I feel pretty good about the lineup leading off with Byron. And like anytime there's 6 drivers we've mentioned, I usually feel pretty good about the lineup. And again, just discussing the fact that our weekly disclaimer that this is before we know qualifying positions, and that's vital to especially a track like Martinsville, where you're banking on a lot of laps led to factor into the points you're going to get. So with that being said, let's put our money where our mouth is here, Cole. We've thrown a lot of drivers out there, and we've got some unfinished business. We got to talk about our race winner and our sleeper picks. And I kind of reverse jinxed us last week by saying neither of us had picked a race winner yet. We'd both come extremely close, including with our sleepers. Matter of fact, I feel like I've had almost every sleeper in the top 10, it feels like. But for those who maybe are new, we pick a winner every week and a sleeper every week, and we take turns based on who goes first. And with regard to sleepers, that is in reference to drivers outside the top 15 in odds. I'm going to go first this week, and I'm going to go with the favorite. I'm taking Ryan Blaney for the race win.
Very nice. Yeah, I forgot to mention this during our opening segment here on the Money Stop, but both of our winner and sleeper picks finished inside the top 9 last week, so we did a really good job on that front. For me, my sleeper pick, I'm going to go with Josh Berry. I was feeling good about Ryan Preece going into this one. But I just think playing off the Penske prowess at the paperclip, we'll go with Josh Berry at Martinsville as a sleeper. And for my winner pick, I'm going to go back-to-back with Kyle Larson. Yeah, I feel great about him. I think momentum's very real for that driver and that team, and his stats are just really damn good here. So we'll go with Kyle Larson.
Yeah, I have no argument whatsoever for that. So you're going Josh Berry for your sleeper, Kyle Larson for your winner. For my sleeper, I will just take Ryan Preece. Why not? I feel, again, we said everything that needs to be said. I feel like very similar racing profiles to Josh Berry and Ryan Preece, right? And similar to the way that you went with Kyle Larson back-to-back weeks. Well, this is my second straight week picking Ryan Preece. So this is Martinsville. This is, those 4 drivers are 4 that I feel pretty good about. So that'll do it. We're going to drop the jack on this week's episode of the Money Stop. I feel like that sums it up pretty nicely. Like we talked about a lot of these sort of short track ringers, Cole. But again, I just kind of like to end on the note that Martinsville is one of my favorite tracks. It is undefeated by Father Time, which feels ironic that they give away the grandfather clock. Nice. Growing up for me, it was always a little biased because I was a diehard Jimmy Johnson fan, obviously. Grab my card over here. And so every time he came here, it felt like he was going to dominate and win the race. Here's my great card. Nice. And so just growing up with that bias, it just felt like a safe and secure week for me. And obviously, there's always been the fun memories that come with Martinsville, too. I don't know if you have any to share or anything else to add, but just anytime we go to Martinsville, it's a fun week for me.
I mean, the obvious one for me is Dale Jr.'s win in 2014. You could tell how much that win meant to him, and it's just a testament to how difficult this track is to master and just get around. It's a very physical track. It's a very demanding track. So I even though the racing has gone stale there the last few years with the next-gen car, I always appreciate drivers who can get it done there and just the physical toll it takes on them to get around there for 400 or 500 laps. So I always enjoy this one as well, and looking forward to it. I know despite the short track package, I'm looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I think that this season overall has proven to have some surprises. It's had some things up its sleeve, and hopefully that translates to Martinsville. It's going to be a fun one. It's probably also, I would also say that this is number 1 on my NASCAR bucket list. Like I haven't been to places like Bristol. There's not a ton other ones that are like top of the bucket list, but for me, Martinsville is definitely number 1. And Martinsville hot dog, got to try it before I die. I hope I go there more than once too.
We'll get there.
Yeah, eventually. Well, this is the Cookout 400. Hopefully you're cooking out with some hot dogs, whatever you do to watch Martinsville. As Cole likes to say, crack open a Mountain Dew. I'm sure you've got yours loaded up, but we'll drop the jack. This has been another great episode of the Money Stop. Hopefully you've been telling us all season. It's been a successful one. Thank you, Money Stop Mafia. Thank you, Freak Nation. For all of us with Kicking the Tires, Speed Freaks, everybody all the way around. Thanks, as always, too, for Richie for producing. I know that sometimes it's Cole producing, it's Richie. We got a great crew here, so thanks so much. And we will see you next week after Martinsville.